All right, welcome everyone to this special live show because today, on July 14th or July 15th, depending on where you are in the world, it was just announced, or at least released, that we are going to be getting a new Agent 007 in James Bond 25, played by none other than Lashana Lynch of Captain Marvel fame. This is something that, if you've watched earlier Midnight's Edge videos, shouldn't come as a huge surprise because we reported that there was going to be a new female James Bond as early as April, and now we know who it's going to be. And with us to discuss that, in addition to Rob and Tom,
Hello.
Hello.
we have a very special guest with us today who is also a huge James Bond aficionado. Welcome, Robert Meyer Burnett.
Oh, it's great to be back here. And, you don't have to twist my arm to talk about James Bond.
Glad to hear it, because we'll be doing a lot of it today. Now, before we get into these news about Lashana Lynch taking over as Agent 007, let's begin with what James Bond means to all of us. And Tom, since your story is going to be the shortest, let's begin with you.
Well, mainly, I'm not a huge Bond fan in the sense that it's not that I dislike Bond in any way. I've just never really had the opportunity to sit down and watch more than bits and pieces of a movie on TV at some point. Of course, I'm used to, I'm aware of all the traits. I've seen the Austin Power movies and stuff like that, where they kind of make fun of some of the Bond tropes. But other than that, I'm just more aware of how Bond is ingrained in the kind of the pantheon of the world, really, not just the US or UK, but just the type of character he is, the type of movies they are, how the series has had this longevity because they just keep reinventing it instead of it being an ongoing series until recently. That's really where my main I don't really have any frame of reference other than that, so I'll probably be very quiet outside of this rambling here.
And then I can go because I'm the one that has the second least to say. I grew up with James Bond in some sense. The first movie I saw was actually the final one with Roger Moore, the one that you, Burnett, said that should be the last movie that people are introduced with Bond.
View to a Kill.
That's how I was introduced to James Bond. View to a Kill, exactly. Thank you. So that was the first I saw, and License to Kill was the second one I saw, and then I went back and I saw the original Sean Connery movies, and to me they are the real Bonds. And my favorite, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, is still probably Diamonds Are Forever. So there you have me. So yeah, I like my Bond just fine, but I'm not a huge fan or anything. It's a franchise I like, but I don't love it. Before we let Burnett start waxing on about what Bond means to you, Rob, you're the second biggest Bond fan among us. What does James Bond mean to you?
Well, actually, I share similar stories to Mr. Burnett, is in that I remember when I was a kid, the ABC Sunday night movie, the ABC Thursday night movies. Tonight on the ABC Thursday night movie, Roger Moore is 007. James Bond in Live and Let Die, And of course, being a big Beatles / Paul McCartney fan, Live and Let Die was always played, constantly on a loop at times. When I go see him, whenever I saw him, it's a huge number. Stadium lights up, stadium goes wild. My father was a huge James Bond, not a huge, but he was a big James Bond fan. And he'd always, because he was from Italy, he always got a kick whenever they would go to Venice or whenever they go to Rome or whatever. My brother Dino is actually a huge, even bigger Bond fan than I am. I mean, he has a lot of collectibles. I mean, he wore a white jacket with the black tie, like Sean Connery did in Goldfinger and his wedding. I mean, it was So James Bond's always been sort of been omnipresent in my house growing up, and yeah, I've read several of the books. I've seen all the movies back and front. And whenever someone tries to one up me and say, "Well, they should stop making Bond movies," I say, "Have you seen Casino Royale?" And they would say to me, "Have you ever seen Moonraker?" More times over the last 40 years than you could ever possibly know. So even Moonraker, which is one of the weaker ones, even I find good things in that. So that's sort of where I am with the Bond series.
Should I start?
Yes.
Yeah, Robert Meyer Burnett. Yeah. What about you? What does the series mean to you?
Well,
Yeah,
like you said, I mean, I came to the Bond franchise because as a kid, you know, in the United States when I was growing up, there was only 3 networks. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS, and ABC would always show Bond films. Now, I can't remember how I stumbled across the franchise, but I remember always loving it since I was very little. And when it was on Sunday nights, it was always a negotiation with my parents because like my bedtime was 8 or 9 o'clock. And the Bond films, especially if it was a longer Bond movie like Thunderball, would run in a 3-hour time slot. So it would go up to 11 o'clock. And I always had to beg my parents to let me stay up and watch. So I was as much as like Star Trek was, like the original series, James Bond was hugely important to me. And there was, of course, Corgi Toys out of England had made the die-cast DB5 from Goldfinger that had the working ejector seat and the pop-up bulletproof shield, and these things were just a staple of my life. Like I spent a lot of time dreaming about being James Bond, and the first James Bond movie I saw in the theater was in 1977, The Spy Who Loved Me. So what was so interesting about that year, obviously it was the same year that Star Wars came out, and the Bond franchise, I had never seen, for whatever reason, I'd never seen a Bond film in the theater, just even though they'd been re-released. And Spy Who Loved Me was a return. Both Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun were flat films, meaning they were not widescreen movies. They were not Panavision films. So of the Bond franchise, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger were flat. I think they're flat, so they're 1/66. The Academy, basically the Academy, or the British ratio. That's the picture frame. It looks more square. And then with Thunderball, the Bond franchise really went epic, and it was widescreen. So for Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Diamonds Are Forever, you had widescreen movies. And then when they introduced Roger Moore, they went back to the flat format. And then they went back out to widescreen movies with Spy Who Loved Me to give it that huge epic feel because the movie was gigantic. So I was 10 and I saw Star Wars and Spy Who Loved Me, you know, pretty close together. And these were the movies, those 2 films. I mean, I already loved movies and wanted to make movies, but those were really the 2 movies that solidified the fact that I have to work in Hollywood. I have to work in the entertainment business. And as much as I loved Star Wars, and that was really life-changing, to see a James Bond movie, to make the transition from television to the big screen, it was really impactful on me as a kid. And then 3 years later, when I got a VCR in 1980, VHS players were fairly new back then. And of course, one of the first things that I needed to do was get all of the James Bond movies. And MGM was starting to release pre-recorded tapes, and they released the Bond films. And this is sort of here's something crazy. I actually bought a CED disc player, not a Laserdisc player, but a CED, capacitance electronic disc player, because the only way you could get On Her Majesty's Secret Service on pre-recorded any format was it was on a CED disc before it was on VHS. So I bought one to get On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then I would copy it. My friend Mike and I copied the movies, and so I was a Bond fanatic. And in 2012, I'd always seen tests, or not press screenings of all of the Bond movies. They'd send reporters there. Since from A View to a Kill on, I'd seen press screenings, so I wanted to do it up right. And in 2012, for the 50th anniversary of the film franchise, I flew to London, and I went to the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square because I wanted to see it with true Brits, true fans. And the movie opened 2 weeks ahead of its American debut. It opened in the UK 2 weeks early. So I bought tickets for the first show of Skyfall. I met my friend Charlie de Lazarica, who's a great DVD special features producer and filmmaker in his own right. He came over to London and we saw Skyfall in London at the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square, which had hosted many British premieres of films. It was a very famous theater from way back. And I'm planning on doing the same thing for Bond, the 25th Bond film in 2020. I'm going to go back to London, and you're all invited. Anybody who can make it there, I'll get tickets. Just tell me how many to get, because I had to get them. I had to go online, and we're going to go there. The first show of Bond 25, we're going to be in Leicester Square at the Odeon Cinema seeing. I would assume that's where it's going to open. I don't know for a fact, but I would assume so. And I'm going to go see the official 25th James Bond movie. Of course, in that the Casino Royale doesn't count and Never Say Never Again doesn't count because they're not official Bond films. But I can't wait. I've loved the Bond series my entire life. And look, I even would argue that there's probably just as many, if not more, mediocre Bond films than there are great Bond movies. But I love the franchise as a whole, for warts and all. Like I don't like A View to a Kill. I don't like License to Kill. I don't like Man with the Golden Gun very much, or Diamonds Are Forever. But I love them at the same time. So I'm just a huge James Bond fanatic.
Yeah, it seems to follow a pattern, doesn't it? I mean, it starts with a good one, and then they kind of go progressively. They get progressively worse, and then they reel it back, and then they get better, and then they start to go down that they go down that rabbit hole again, and then they reel it back again.
Kind of like Star Trek in short form or long form. I mean,
well, you know what's interesting about the Bond franchise is that when it debuted, obviously the novels were very popular, and people like John Kennedy, JFK really liked the Bond franchise. But the movie series, when it first debuted, the movie series was monstrously popular. After Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger were monstrously popular movies. They would even put them in cinemas and run them 24 hours a day. And what I think is really forgotten about the Bond franchise now is that when the film series debuted in 1962, you know, basically the middle class, especially in America, was where most people's heads were at. After World War II, the Greatest Generation sort of came back and created the American middle class. There was not as much income inequality as there is now. And most people, most Americans had not, say, traveled abroad on a jet, on a passenger jet. So the Bond franchise was not just a spy thriller based on Ian Fleming's novels, but it was truly wish fulfillment for the audience. It was giving the audience this, you know, you lived vicariously through Bond. You traveled around the world. You went to exotic places. You met beautiful women. You went places that most Americans were never going to see. So there was a real component of wish fulfillment for audiences back then. And they really were trendsetters. The Bond films really set trends, and there were many imitators, such as the Matt Helm films, for instance, the Flint movies like Our Man Flint with James Coburn. And there were many Bond imitators, but the Bond franchise was ginormously huge in the 60s. And then, unfortunately, in the 70s, the Bond franchise it chased trends instead of setting trends. Like Live and Let Die was a response to the blaxploitation movies, and then Man with the Golden Gun it incorporated the martial arts craze, you know, on the heels of Bruce Lee and all the martial arts movies that were popular, and it didn't really. It was a shadow of its former self. And then with Spy Who Loved Me and its remake Moonraker. Look, I have great big love for Moonraker, as goofy as it is. I love Moonraker, but it's interesting in how the Bond franchise has sort of strived to be relevant, and I think it's sort of unfortunately devolved into your standard action franchise. When Bond disappeared for 6 years, from 89 to 2000, 89 to 95. there was a Bond movie pretty much every 2 years since the franchise began. And then because of the lawsuits and Kevin McClory, who was there at the beginning, and the rights issues, Bond laid fallow. It was dormant for 6 years until GoldenEye in '95, when they brought Pierce Brosnan in to play the character. There wasn't a Bond film for 6 years. And I think since the Brosnan Bond, since '95, James Bond has really struggled for relevance when you had other franchises sort of overshadowing what Bond was always doing. And you have, of course, the Jason Bourne franchise. And now under Christopher McQuarrie's helming, leadership, direction, it's going to be really hard for James Bond to sort of over or outdo what we saw in Mission Impossible Fallout. Because the Mission Impossible movies have sort of replaced the Bond films as far as globe-trotting and showing us things we've never seen before. And of the Craig era, I'm really only a fan of I love Casino Royale, and I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist, and I did not like Skyfall very much, and I thought Spectre was a yawn. I thought Spectre was a crushing disappointment.
Yeah, I thought Spectre was also it commits the worst cinematic crime of all. It was boring.
It was boring, and Blofeld didn't do anything. What was the plot? The plot, it was just no, I long for the glory days of Spectre stealing atomic weapons in Thunderball.
I actually agree. I halfway forgot what happened in Spectre already.
I don't know what happened in Spectre.
No, but what I can say is that what they tried to do was they tried to retroactively connect all the Daniel Craig movies after the fact. In that they're trying to make this into some sort of big Marvel-esque universe, which it is not supposed to be. That's the thing, And there was a reviewer, I won't mention his name, but he actually incorporated a clip into his review of Vince McMahon ripping off the Hood. It was me, Austin. It was me all along. Like Blofeld is supposed to be the architect behind all these events, with Vesper Lynn at the end of Casino Royale, and Mr. White in Quantum of Solace, and all these things, and De Silva in Skyfall. I mean, come on, you're that kind of deductive. I wouldn't call it even deductive storytelling. Reductive storytelling doesn't work very well. It's hard to do, and it's very difficult to pull off.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, but the other thing too about James Bond is, like I say, it chases trends. Okay, this is going to sound weird. Jason, well, they were trying to turn Bond into Jason Bourne. They're trying to turn it into Marvel. Bond's biggest enemy right now is not Blofeld. It's not Spectre. It's Austin Powers. And let me explain what I mean by that. When Austin Powers premiered, Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, I mean, yeah, it was great. I freaking love Austin Powers. I love the Austin. I watch them still on a regular basis. They're on TV. I watch them. But what it did was, even more so than Our Man Flint or other spy parodies, or even the Charles Feldman Casino Royale, it really did play with the James Bond tropes, in that it not only played with the James Bond tropes, it did them in such a way, it sort of almost did them better in a way. And then Austin Powers kind of became its own thing. And now I think what you have is, you have a lot of writers and directors, they're afraid to go back to the classic James Bond tropes, in that, oh my God, this will look too silly now. The audience is so much sophisticated.
Well, I think it's even worse than that, Rob. I think the biggest problem, so much more, is that Bond stands for everything that this Me Too movement is against.
Well, the other thing, and another thing you should say about that, and who actually stands for everything the Me Too movement is against? Archer, which is actually another parody of James Bond, which I also love. And they're afraid of, like I said, they're afraid of the mockery that would come with it. And so now they have to go, it's got to be personal. We got to turn it into the Dark Knight, and we have to change Bond. I'm like, no, you don't change Bond. You have drop Bond into the world and you have him react to it. It's so simple. I'm like, but everybody they're overthinking this. Rob, what do you think? I mean, am I just going off on a tangent here, or is there something to this?
No, I mean, look, I think what's really strange about the world that we live in is that somehow we, like, men are supposed to not admit that we get turned on by hot women. Like that literally has become something that we're not supposed to do. Well, let me tell you, I don't want to live in that world. I mean, I love hot women, and I grew up as a kid learning a lot about women from the James Bond franchise. Between James Kirk and James Bond, there was a lot of education going on. And, and the whole thing about Bond is a sensualist. He drinks great champagne at specific temperatures, so tastes the best. He only eats the greatest caviar. The guy knows he only wears the best suits, and frankly, he only wants to sleep with the world's most beautiful women. And I think that's part of the entire wish fulfillment aspect of Bond's character. And when Living Daylights came out, there was a lot made. That was in the AIDS era, and there was a lot made of the fact that there was only one Bond girl. That Miss Dabo, who played Mariam Dabo, who played the character. And that was the only girl, and she was like this nice girl, and Bond was really nice to her, and that was seen as a response to what was happening. I mean, AIDS was tearing through whole artistic communities around the world, and that was seen as a response to that. And now, what does M say to Bond when Pierce Brosnan's introduced? She says, and it was great, she goes, "You're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. You're a relic from the Cold War." And it's really interesting that the Bond franchise for at least 20 years has tried to apologize for the franchise itself. That's when Judi Dench says that, when M says that in GoldenEye, she's basically saying, okay, we understand the world is changing, and your catting ways and the way you go through women. There's the scene in Goldfinger in the pre-title sequence where Bond is making out with this belly dancer, and he sees a thug reflected in her eye that's creeping up behind him, that's going to crack him in the head. And Bond, instead of taking the blow, throws the woman in the way, and the thug smashes her and knocks her out. I mean, Bond was if that scene were in a movie today, I mean, can you imagine what the people would scream and yell? But in Bond's
it would be a hate crime.
Yeah, and in Bond's world, though, everybody's disposable. He has a license to kill. Like, his job is to succeed in his mission. I mean, one of the reasons, like, I hated Skyfall, to be honest. I hated it because it was a movie where James Bond repeatedly fails throughout the entire film. I thought, and this is sort of crazy, there's this beautiful woman who states that she's been abused since she was a young girl, since she was like 12. And now she does what Silva tells her to do, and they literally put a shot glass or a glass, and they're shooting at her, and they kill her. And when I saw that in Skyfall, I almost got up and walked out of the movie, because James Bond would never allow that to happen, especially to a beautiful woman that, women die all the time in the Bond franchise, but Bond would have done something to save her. And I'm like, you know what? This franchise in trying to be, it's like what's happened with Bond is what's happened with Star Trek. They're trying to turn it into something that it isn't. Mm-hmm. And I think what's fascinating to me is it doesn't work, and that's why I think I liked Quantum of Solace so much. On one hand, they tried to edit it like a Bourne movie. It wasn't shot to be a Bourne movie. So the quick cutting in Quantum of Solace really bothers me. But I think the idea of having a really strong-willed woman that Bond helps out or teams up with who doesn't die, I really liked that. And I thought that Skyfall was really sort of reductivist. And in a way, it took away everything. I don't want to watch a Bond that's lost his step. I want to watch a Bond who is great at his job, ruthlessly will eliminate anyone that gets in the way of what he's supposed to do, and wins in the end. He's a fantasy spy character. And I don't think that he needs to. They keep trying to make him relevant. I think the best way to make a Bond film is just make him the way Sean Connery was early on in our day and age, because that would be revolutionary.
Yeah. Well, you said actually about he's good at his job. That is the thing I think a lot of people are missing. He's not Superman. He's not Batman. He's not trying to make the world a better place. This is his job. This is his 9 to 5. He was recruited into the Secret Service, MI6, out of the British Navy because they saw something in him that they could develop. He's not trying to make the world a better place. He's trying to preserve the status quo and maintain the last remnants of the British Empire. Again, this is his 9 to 5, and trying to make it personal, trying to make it some sort of statement is completely missing the point. I understand that there's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief when it comes to these movies, because if you think about it, he's a pretty lousy spy. You know, what spy would be driving a $200,000 sports car and blowing everything up? Really, if you think about it,
right?
A spy's job is to maintain a low profile. And you kind of have to think of him as a blunt object. He's the guy that, remember what he said in was it Thunderball? He goes, "What do you do, for a living, Mr. Bond?" "I'm a licensed troubleshooter."
Right.
That pretty much describes what he does, really. And that's what I'd like to see the series get back to.
Oh yeah, and ever since with License to Kill, one of the reasons I was really not a fan of, I loved Living Daylights. I still think Living Daylights is top tier Bond. That was 1987, and that was the first time we saw Timothy Dalton. I loved him as Bond, even though they tried to soften him up with one girl. I didn't mind any of that. I really liked the movie. It's really interesting to look at now because the climax is set in Afghanistan. It's just really interesting, especially considering how the world has changed. It's the last time John Barry did a musical score for the series. But so I really liked that film, but I hated License to Kill. And in License to Kill, it was a revenge story where Bond literally went after a drug dealer for killing Felix Leiter's wife and cutting a limb off. He was avenging his friend. And the movie was shot. I said on my YouTube show that the movie was shot in Mexico, and I didn't mean that. I wasn't disparaging Mexico. I was just saying that the reason that a lot of it was shot there was because they were trying to save money, and there's not a lot of globe trotting. And they were really, again, they were reacting to things like Miami Vice. Miami Vice was the epitome of cool in the mid to late 80s, and they were trying to emulate that. Like, let's have Bond go after a drug dealer, and I'm like, give me a break. We don't want to watch Bond go after a drug dealer. I mean, one of the big action sequences in that movie involves semi trucks that are transporting drugs in liquid form. It's like, really? I get it. Maybe you haven't done semi trucks before, but there's a reason why, and it's interesting. That was another time when Bond went off on revenge, and now, now he's been mopey Bond. I mean, I really liked one of the things I loved about Casino Royale is especially from the opening scene when they introduced Daniel Craig, when he first takes out that bent, the guy that's betraying them, and the guy's trying to get under his skin, and Bond's like, "Made you feel it, he's saying to Bond, "Made you feel it, did he, that first kill?" And then when Bond finally takes the guy out, it's his second kill, so he reaches 007 status. Bond's like, considerably, he loves being James Bond in Casino Royale. Craig is just eating it all up, and we as the audience were like, hell yeah. And he was far more rough and tumble and back down to the Sean Connery era. It was like he unapologetically sleeps with this gorgeous married woman, and steals her husband's car, and it basically plays him for it in a game. But it's great. He loves being Bond. And then ever since then, okay, Vesper dies, and now he turns into mopey Bond who's on revenge or whatever in Quantum of Solace, even though I like Quantum of Solace. And then by the time you get to Skyfall, it's like, who is this guy? Like, he accidentally gets shot, off of a train at the beginning of a mission. He doesn't even finish his mission. He just goes to get drunk on some island somewhere. I'm like, what the hell is this? Bond getting drunk. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah, Bond would. When did you ever really see Bond drunk? I mean, you never saw Bond drunk. He would drink, yes, but he was always portrayed as being able to handle his liquor.
Oh,
but
yeah.
What sold me on Casino Royale was at the poker table when the guy pulls out his keychain. This is the keys to the 1964 Aston Martin DB5 in parking lot. Oh no. So he says, please give him the chance to win his money back. And it's just that confidence is what sold me on Daniel Craig initially. I'm like, yep, okay, I'm on board now.
Totally. And that movie's great.
Absolutely. And then I read afterwards. I read the novel. I'm like, yeah, this is what they had in mind.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you go back. I mean, it's not beat for beat, but there's a whole chapter about playing Baccarat, which they changed to Texas Hold'em. They don't call it Texas Hold'em.
Yeah, I mean, but again, that was them trying to be relevant. Oh, the kids love Texas Hold'em. Yeah. And to me, that felt really out of place. Like they've gone. It was. I mean, I didn't mind it because I know it was a high stakes poker game, but it just felt like Bond is playing Texas Hold'em.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's a minor quibble.
Yeah, that I could let that slide because the rest of the movie was very good. And later I learned about the scene with the Aston Martin DBS flipping over. That they actually set, which they always seem to do. They set a record, the world record for most continuous car rotations in a crash.
Right, you mean in Casino Royale?
Casino Royale. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But wasn't that was like watching the Enterprise blow up in Star Trek 3?
Yeah, it was terrible. I'm like, oh, that poor car. It's just like, how could they do that to an Aston Martin? No, but again, and if you look in the Guinness Book of World Records, the James Bond movies do hold quite a few of them. Longest speedboat, Live and Let Die, largest soundstage, Pinewood Studios. I mean, there are quite a few records, but this whole thing about chasing trends to me, it's okay. At what point do they reel it back again? That's what I want to know.
I don't know because both Skyfall and Spectre made a lot of money.
Yeah, they made a buttload of money. That's right.
I mean, what's really interesting is the Bond franchise, from a monetary standpoint, is doing quite well, and it's I'm looking on right. Skyfall made $1,108,561 at the worldwide box office, and that is, I mean, it joined the Bond franchise joined the $1 billion club. Exactly. And their follow-up Spectre, it only made $880 million, but I mean that was the 24th movie in a franchise, James Bond, that started in 1962. It made 880, close to $1 billion. I mean, that's huge. Now, Spectre was supposedly the most expensive Bond, but that's still huge money for that franchise.
Burnett, I have a question about that. Because Bond joined the $1 billion club, but $1 billion today is not the same as $1 billion 10 years ago or 20 years ago. These $1 billion movies, attendance-wise, how did they do compared to previous Bond movies?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's I think
in terms of tickets bought.
Yeah, I think more people were going to Bond movies back in the 60s, but that's true. I think attendance was bigger across the board. So yeah, you could go back and you could say, okay, well, but I still think the profits and if you look in terms of how much a movie made back in the day, the money the Bond franchise is making even now is enormous. It's still big.
The thing that's weird is, like, Bond was the first real franchise, if you don't count like the Universal monsters. It was the first kind of like real franchise in America and UK and in the mainstream media where you had multiple sequels. I believe you had some merchandise. You said that you had the car. I know you didn't have much for toys or anything like that, but you had the car and a few other things. And they were event movies. They were first real big tentpole movies, I guess I could say, at least from what I can see from the perspective of where I'm at.
Yeah, I never really considered the Bond franchise having sequels because they were adaptations of the books. I mean, when they ran out of books, they took the short story titles, like Quantum of Solace was a short story title, and things like that. And then License to Kill was going to be called License Revoked because they had the John Gardner. There was a writer named John Gardner who started writing Bond books in the 80s, and one of his books was License Revoked, and so License to Kill was going to be called License Revoked, and then they realized that no one knows what the word revoked means because American audiences are not. So that's at least that's what I've read. So they called it. I mean, License to Kill is a better title, and one of the things that like, I'm curious why they haven't announced the title for Bond 25 yet. I've heard that they had a title, they didn't like it or whatever. I've read, you guys might know. Because I love the Bond titles,
The rumor going around was that it was going to be called Shatterhand.
Mm-hmm. I heard that. And then there was another title that was bandied about.
Yeah.
That was a bad title.
Yeah. I hadn't heard what the second title was. I did. I probably could look into it and see what it is, but
it was Bubble Butt.
Well, Doug, there's a guy, Doug Benson. I think he writes new Bond novels.
Raymond Benson.
Ray Benson, yeah, my bad. But he wrote a Bond novel called Shatterhand,
right?
And but that has actually been debunked by I think.
Although that is a cool title.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
I do like that title.
Yeah. I was about to say though, I mean, at the time the Bond movies were event movies. If you ever seen what was it? Actually Richard Hammond from Top Gear, and the Grand Tour, he did a whole special about Bond cars. They took the DB5 in the 60s on tour all through Europe to promote Goldfinger.
Nice.
It was a big deal. I mean, and originally Aston Martin, they wouldn't give them a car. They tried to get a car. They said, "Can you please give us a car?" And he said, "No, we don't want." So we finally said, "Okay, we won't give you a car, but we will sell you one for £5,000." So they bought two of them.
Maybe we should start to get on the real reason why I think we've gathered here today. Because we've spent a good hour talking about just Bond in general.
We can do it for another hour if you want.
Of course. I'm sure you guys could. Andre, did you want to kind of bring in the main topic at hand here?
Well, yes. Well, first thing, just to conclude what we said already, I remember the release of GoldenEye, and yeah, that was a huge deal in Europe. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I had never seen queues around the block in cinemas in Oslo before that, but there were for GoldenEye. That being said, let's move on to the main topic of the day. As we broke, well, of course, we reported from others who broke it first, but still we made a video about it back in April, that James Bond 25, the storyline was that James Bond would be retired, and the story would follow a new Agent 007, a female 007, courtesy of the screenwriter that was brought in. Let's see what's her name again.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who created? She created both Fleabag and also Killing Eve.
And she was the female droid in Solo.
Right.
Yeah, that would be the one. And now, today, we then learned that this evidently was true, because now we have our female James Bond, who's not only a female, but also a black female, to please those that wanted Idris Elba for Bond, I guess. Namely, Lashana Lynch of Captain Marvel fame. What are your thoughts on that? Burnett?
Well, okay, first of all, we've seen 007 or 00s die in Bond films, like at the beginning of Live and Let Die. And then, of course, we met a 00 who went bad, Alex Trevelyan, in GoldenEye. So in the film, they announced that James Bond is retired. So to me, my mind, I was always under the impression, especially after, reporting what you guys reported, I figured that they were going to have some kind of other 007 in the movie. Because if Bond retired, I assumed this is my own. I have no knowledge of this at all. This is in my own thought process and way of thinking that the 00 numbers, since they're replaced, you know, when they die or age out or whatever, that they have to assign that number to someone else, you know, and I would just assume that there was going to be another 007 in the movie. And from the reporting in the British tabloids today, it says at the beginning of the film, M says, "Come in, 007." And then we have Lashana Lynch walk in playing the new 007. Now, I actually like this idea. I wish that I didn't know this. I wish I could have seen it in the movie itself, because I think that would have been it would have been pretty cool. And I like the idea of, look, we've seen Bond teamed up with Anya Amasova in Spy Who Loved Me. She was his Russian counterpart. They were equals. As much as you could have a female equal to James Bond in a 1977 movie, but they were clearly as smart as one another. I mean, she was still a woman, obviously. And there was times when Bond had to have the edge on her and save her life and things like that, like from Jaws. But it was, and then of course we saw Michelle Yeoh. He teamed up with Michelle Yeoh in Tomorrow Never Dies. So the idea of having women in Bond films that are of equal stature to James Bond is not something that is foreign to the franchise. So I think if this were 10 years ago and you did a movie about Bond retiring, nobody would care. But now, in the wake of where we're at, I think it's kind of silly. I mean, obviously the producers saw something in her. She probably gave a kick-ass audition. I like the fact that it changes up the franchise. I enjoy it. I suspect she's going to get killed, and that's why either Bond is either going to work with her for a while, or maybe they'll keep her, depending on how, if her character kicks ass. Look, I've always liked female spies. I liked Atomic Blonde. I love La Femme Nikita. You know, I love the British TV series. I was talking about this earlier, Spooks, that had male and female agents, and that was about their domestic service, MI5. And they constantly killed people in that show. The principal characters were frequently killed in the line of duty, and they were replaced. But so I think it's cool. I think it's a way to change up the franchise. I do think it smacks a little bit of, again, pandering to the times, which I think is annoying that the franchise is continuing to do that, because I think if anything needs to be go back to its roots, let's bring back the sexist, misogynist dinosaur, because in our modern age, we need these people because they're the only people that can save the world. If we have to sit around and wait for everybody who's bitching and moaning and complaining about equality and representation, that's fine. But there's a nuclear weapon that's going to go off, or in the case of Rami Malek, some kind of genetic, biologically engineered, weaponized, whatever it is. And you know what? You can talk about representation and equality till you're blue in the face, or until the world ends. We need the sexist, misogynist dinosaur of James Bond's ilk to save us. That's what I think.
I don't have much more to add to that. I mean, again, my problem, much like you, my problem is, why are they doing this? I saw Captain Marvel. I didn't like Lashana Lynch in Captain Marvel. Yeah, the joke for me is, last time I saw anything that wooden, I was in Home Depot. I mean, geez, that goes for everything about that movie. But
well, my problem was they didn't seem like they were friends. They just seemed like they were acting like they were friends.
Okay,
should be said though, that wasn't her fault. That was so we don't know if that's her acting or if it's the direction. I'm inclined to believe that, but moving on.
All right, well, that's neither here nor there for the time being. But like I said, I mean, the idea of you have an agent coming, he comes in, and if he's training a new agent, that's cool. Or this idea that there's no getting out for you. That is kind of an interesting idea. But again, I mean, are they going to beat me over the head and try to lecture me about, oh, well, you shouldn't like this because of the, you know, how dare you? And like we were saying before, it seems like the franchise is trying to apologize for itself now.
Right.
And is this another way that they're trying to do? Is this their way of trying to correct that, or trying to overcorrect that? And I can't help but think that bringing in Phoebe listen, okay, if this turns out to be good, fine, great. I will freely admit, okay, this was good. This was good idea, whatever, blah, blah, blah. If it turns out to be bad, a lot of the blame is going to be heaped on Phoebe Waller-Bridge because she's the one they brought in to do this. I hate putting it all on her, but this is, I mean, at the same time, she's going to be held up as the architect of this, and there's a lot of people going to point to her. Ha! See, we knew it. You brought her in. You brought her in, and everything went to shit. Or
well,
I'm not so sure about. I don't think that normies know that.
Also, I mean, I love Killing Eve, and the how do you pronounce her name? I always say Villeneuve. It's not Villeneuve. The character in the Killing Eve is based on a series of novels, but I love the portrayal of the characters in Killing Eve, and I think that, you know, from what I understand, they brought they brought her in to get some of that kind of Villanelle. That's her name, Villanelle. The Villanelle novels is what Killing Eve is based on, and Villanelle is this a completely amoral Russian agent who takes total joy in whether it's sex or killing. I mean, it's a great character. And I could see, because Daniel Craig especially, I as was reported, wanted her to come in. And I could see that anybody who created or brought Villanelle to the screen would want some of that to rub off in the Bond franchise. And then even the relationship that Villanelle has with Sandra Oh, who's chasing her. So I actually thought that was a pretty good hire. Like, I was a fan of that, because both Fleabag and Killing Eve are great shows. And I'm all about the writing. And I think, you know, Bond has always been when they have good scripts, they're great movies, but it's always the writing that torpedoes the franchise. And I think bringing her in was actually a good thing to do, because especially Villanelle is not a politically correct character in the least. You know, she's completely amoral and psychopathic, and I love her so much. I mean, she's the girl you dream of dating if she wasn't going to kill you.
She's essentially like a praying mantis, really. Yeah.
Yes. So great.
Yeah. Yeah. For what I've seen of Killing Eve, actually, it's been. I don't watch it faithfully as you do, but a few times I've seen Killing Eve, it's been very good. But one of the things I often notice, though, and I call people on social media the Twitterati,
right?
Is a lot of this being done to satisfy the Twitterati and to satisfy those on social media who will get those retweets and the outspoken, you know, the hashtag, the hashtag activists. And I do see a lot of the same things going around. It seems like they're trying to tailor this movie for those people who say, I'm not a fan, but I'm like, but if these people aren't fans to begin with, then I don't think there's much you could do to sway them. I'm not a fan. And usually those are the people that have the worst ideas. And I've seen this, you know, they should kill Bond within the first 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, franchise over. I mean, it just seems like a very lazy kind of way to go about it.
Well, you know, it's really interesting because the Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, who inherited the Bond franchise from Barbara's father, Cubby, they have produced basically, it's not a female Bond, but a female-centric spy thriller series. It's a new series based on a series of books called the movie is called The Rhythm Section, and the movie is coming out next year. They haven't dropped. I know that they've test screened it, but they haven't dropped a trailer for it. And it's coming out next year, and it was directed by Reed Morano. She's a incredible cinematographer. I think it's her. It might be her directorial debut. I'm not sure about that, but The Rhythm Section is based on a novel by Mark Burnell, and Blake Lively plays the Stephanie Patrick character who gets sort of drawn into this intrigue. So in a way, the Broccoli's have already embarked. Well, Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson have already embarked on doing a female-centric action spy series. It just hasn't come out yet. I guess it says it. The IMDb says it's supposed to come out on November 22nd, 2019. But so I think, look, and as we talked about Triple X, Michelle Yeoh's character, we've seen strong women in the Bond franchise before. Hell, even Octopussy has an army of women assassins and agents working for her. So as much as Bond gets taken to task for being a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, we have seen strong women in the franchise before throughout its history. And I think if this is done correctly, I mean, if she kicks ass, if Lashana Lynch kicks ass, it could be really cool. But, I think that anything like this does smack of sort of pandering to the idea. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about who was going to play Bond and what would happen if we changed the race of 007 with Idris Elba, which I just think is strange, because James Bond is based on a series of novels that were Cold War novels that were written by Ian Fleming. That's who James Bond is, period. It's based on and as the movies have moved away from that, it's still always going to be James Bond was a British Navy officer that was recruited by MI6, Rob, as you said. That's who Bond is. Now, like with everything else, ultimately, if you're going to go and try and change the DNA of something, you're going to ruin it. You're going to wreck it. It's going to get destroyed. And what you don't want is you don't want James Bond to be a guest star in his own movie. Now, I have no problem with a female woman of color, of any color, to be the new 007. I think that's really interesting. And if Bond is going to team up with the 00, he or assumes a mentor student relationship, that's cool. But I want to watch a movie where James Bond is front and center. That's what I want out of the Bond franchise. And I think, like you just said, Rob, it's really interesting that I don't think pandering to social norms of the day ever, because they change all the time. And I think by trying to make something that's so topical or is addressing issues that are happening now, there's nothing that immediately dates something faster. And that's what I worry about, is that the film would be compromised by decisions that are made to pander to people that, like you said, aren't even fans of the franchise to begin with. I understand that they're trying to get more people to come see Bond movies, but Bond movies have never been more successful than the last two that they've made. Even Spectre, that wasn't that great. Clearly, there's an audience for the Bond franchise. And I think now more than ever, we need an ass-kicking, take no prisoners, I will kill you because I have a 00 license to kill, and I will enjoy it. We need Bond more than ever now. And the last thing we need Bond to be is to be what the progressive left would deem you have to be woke and inclusive and all that. Because you know what? It's those people that would never save the world from an atomic bomb going off. They just won't. They'll bitch and moan and complain about how they feel terrible that a guy like James Bond is making them feel bad and making them not feel safe in their safe spaces or whatever. But you know what? The world needs James Bond. The world needs a ruthless, intelligent killer that will go places not many other people will go and do the things not many people will do. And that's what I want from a Bond movie. Mm-hmm. And he has insatiable appetites. He loves beautiful women. He likes drinking great alcohol. He likes eating good food and wearing the best suits and driving the best cars, and unapologetically does all of these things because they are awesome.
You know something. You brought up the archetype of James Bond, the beautiful women, the fast cars, the world travel. James Bond was always for me something. It was an impossible thing to achieve, but it was always an aspiration, and that's what it should be. And there's a whole mindset now of people who say, I want to see myself on screen. I'm like, I don't want to see myself on screen. I want to see something that I want to see something that's not like me on screen. And I keep saying, if I want to see myself on screen, every movie I would go see would star Jack Black, short, little, fat, failed musician, come on. But at the same time, like I said, James Bond was always that the pinnacle of masculinity that you would always strive to. You would never achieve it, but it made you want to be better. He knows several languages. He, like I said, fast cars.
Several. He knows them all.
He knows them all. You know,
Right. Well, basically, like I have always said, he's what every man aspires to be and what every straight woman wants to be with. So I mean, it's pretty basically, you know, like it's a fantasy. It's just like every superhero, just like every, you know,
yeah,
hero in every movie.
yeah. But there seems like this idea now we have to take Bond down a few pegs, make him more human. I'm like, no, you're missing the point, guys. No, it's not. We have to take him down a few pegs. I mean, he still has to be that aspirational, because without that aspirational, I mean, nothing else sort of fits into the, like you said, as soon as you start pulling on those threads, you destroy the whole thing. It comes unraveled.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, even as a kid, I wanted to grow up and be James Bond. You know, and watching Star Wars. I mean, I think about 1977 when I was 10 years old. It was such a seminal year in my life because, you know, Star Wars came out, and people forget, as a 10-year-old, you could still want to grow up and be Luke Skywalker because he was a young man, or Han Solo. And that's why, you know, when George Lucas goes back and makes Anakin Skywalker a little kid in The Phantom Menace, I'm like, this guy, he doesn't get his own franchise. Because kids don't want to watch movies about other kids. Kids want to watch movies about people they can grow up and be. And when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I'm like, I want to be James effing Bond.
Yeah.
I want to be able to meet the women he meets. I want to be able, I'd never, of course, tasted liquor, but I wanted to drink a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. I wanted to eat beluga caviar. I wanted to be able to order Bollinger champagne at the perfect temperature. You know, I didn't even know what those things meant. I just knew that I wanted to do them.
You wanted the
confidence. You want the suave, yeah, everything. I tell you though, like I said, it's a wish fulfillment. When the first time I went to Denmark. Went to Denmark in 2011. I went to Copenhagen. I get off the train. I see all the old architecture, the lights being suspended over the street with on the old steel wires, the steel cables. I thought I was in the middle of a Bond movie.
Yep.
And I said, this is what I've been waiting my whole life to experience.
Yep.
Yeah,
Copenhagen's
exactly.
a great city, by the way.
Oh, Copenhagen's great. It's fantastic. I recommend travel tip, go to Copenhagen. So anyway.
Well, that was another thing about James Bond movies, is that you wanted to travel the world.
Exactly.
You know, as a kid, it's like, get a passport. 65% of Americans don't even own a passport. And I'm like, how could you not? Well, if there's one thing that was instilled in me I remember in Spy Who Loved Me, there's a scene at the Great Pyramids where Patrick McNee is doing the voiceover of this like pyramid light show, and Bond is in, running around, and I'm like, man, I want to go to that. I want to go hear that Patrick McNee. I mean, I'm sure there is not a Patrick McNee show at the pyramids, nor was there in 1977. But I wanted to go to the pyramids. I wanted to see the pyramids. I wanted to go see Carnival in Rio, two places I have yet to go in my life, but I still want to eventually get there because of James Bond movies.
Yeah.
But like you, I mean, the first time I went to Paris, I could not stop hearing the song "View to a Kill" in my head because I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower and I wanted to jump off it like Mayday did.
Yeah, exactly. You know? It's the sole reason I want to go to Cortina.
Right.
For your eyes only. Yeah.
We have a super chat that's kind of pertinent to the conversation, but we'll grab the first one here because it's short. This is it. This gave us $5. That's exactly what it says. Exo Squad rules. And then the other one was from Drive By Commentator for $20. Thank you so much. He says, I'm assuming it's a he. Sorry if it's not. I think Hollywood already knows guys are receptive to strong women. It's more about enforcing the dominant male as a cultural taboo. Also, Bond was impervious to weaponized seduction, where the modern male is not so much. That's kind of what I was saying, to a point where it was like basically everything that Bond is, they're trying to make him not. You know what I mean? Like the opposite of.
Get him, Sadie.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. What the hell's wrong with seduction? You know, I mean, like it's such a weird, we live in a world where men are not supposed to desire beautiful women. I mean, aside from the fact that it's biologically put in, we're hardwired for that. I want to watch my hero, finding the most beautiful women in the world and sleeping with them. What's wrong with that? I mean, that's what
You know-
Bond does. And as he orders beluga caviar and the best champagne that they have to offer, you know, I mean, it's really funny because in Casino Royale, which everybody loves, Bond unrepentantly sleeps with an unbelievably beautiful woman whose husband is a douchebag. And James Bond knows he's a douchebag, and that's why he's able to seduce her. He uses the fact that her husband is a douche to move right in and have his way with her. And that was awesome.
What did he say? What did he say to her? He says, "Why can't I meet nice guys?" Well, then you wouldn't need a bad man like me, or something like that. What
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
There's
actually
also-
very relevant to the next super chat we got from Rivers727, who sent a $5 super chat saying, I think the film is dead on arrival in China, as China would deem it Baizu. And to those who may not be aware, Baizu is Chinese for white left, and that is the prohibiting of the kind of behavior that you're describing right now, that one used to do, but not so much anymore.
Wait, come at me again. Like, you can't show seduction in movies?
No,
basically that you can't have Bond go and seduce women and sleep with them, because that's sexist, and men are not supposed to be attracted to women.
The Baizu is the sort of a reprimanding culture that that a lot of people on the left have. You know, oh, you're misogynist, such and such. You know, that's they're very turned off to that.
And that's also one of the points that was in the initial article that we referenced when we first reported about there being a new female James Bond. It was explicitly about James Bond getting a Me Too era makeover, because apparently in the movie James Bond tries to seduce this new 007, which would be Lashana Lynch, and it doesn't work.
Well, I mean, see, I think about a scene like that. I think that's actually a great scene because, you know, Bond has forgotten the fact that if somebody's a 00, they don't get seduced. They're the seducer. You know, I mean, that's why she's a 00, is because she's as good as Bond was. And I like that idea. I think that's great that look at Pussy Galore in Goldfinger. Now, we of course know that her sexuality wasn't directly addressed in the film, but it's sort of it's there, obviously, if you know the character and know the books and all that. But it's nice when Bond sometimes gets rebuffed. I mean, even Dr. Holly Goodhead from Moonraker, he doesn't get to take her down till the end. Take me around the world one more time, James. You know, I mean, I don't mind that. I think that, to me, that would set up a humorous scene. Because you know, the whether it's a male or female 00 agent, I want to believe that the 00s are the best of the best. So if you have a female 00 agent, she has to kick ass. She has to be awesome. And if Bond is able to seduce her, I think that would compromise her character in the film. So that doesn't bother me.
Well, the other thing too, it's all part of that cat and mouse game too.
Right, of course.
Which also puts another layer on it as well.
I mean, I was pissed off when James Bond slept with Grace Jones in View to a Kill, not because of anything other than the fact that she was a bad guy. He should have killed her. She was Christopher Walken's henchman, and I'm like, she deserved to die. But you know, I guess I'm sure it was an interesting evening for James, but I objected to that. You know, it seemed to me like Bond was a little old. He was Roger Moore was the oldest he ever was. It was his last Bond film, and he let the evil henchwoman live, and that seemed out of character for me.
And Grace Jones was supposed to be in this new film, but walked off the set when she found out that her part was not as big as she was hoping.
Yeah, which I didn't.
According to reports.
I don't know, Rob. What I was thinking about that, like, what they're going to bring back a 70-year-old Mayday. Is she supposed to be playing the same character that she was playing in View to a Kill? How did that make any sense?
They never specifically said. I have no idea, but yeah, that struck me as kind of odd that they would.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
it really did.
the whole report seems strange to me. Like, look, anybody that's going to have an actress come in, especially a pop star like Grace Jones, who's known for being prickly, you know, you can't bamboozle her to do some kind of a role. I haven't seen her interviewed about it, so I wonder the veracity of any of those reports.
We did get a $5 super chat from Captain Hare. This super chat is completely irrelevant to the discussion. I just wanted to break up the relevant ones, he says. And the reason I broke this up just a little bit is I did see a comment earlier that somebody brought up. Do you guys think with the whole title discussion, not to take this into a little bit different direction, and the fact that Bond has been retired since the last film, as you guys put it, do you think they'll just call this movie James Bond? Since he's technically not 007 anymore or whatever.
Nah.
No, because the James Bond
just to
franchise,
go with that trend, I mean, too.
but it has
John
some,
Rambo
like Logan
trend,
and yeah. I mean, I would hope not, because the Bond titles are so great. You know, I mean, from Russia with Love, The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun, You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I mean, they're all book titles, but even when they weren't book titles, The World Is Not Enough, which is the James Bond family crest. I mean, just calling a movie James Bond would be talk about following a trend that's lame. I mean, Logan, it made sense. Rambo was Rambo in First Blood Part 2. But just calling a movie James Bond, I want a kick-ass Bond title. I want Craig to go out on an epic, huge, the most Bond-esque note he can go out on. You know, give him a good title. Just to call it James Bond. Give me a title like, you know, I don't know, any of the Bond films. Thunderball. You know, Thunderball is such a cool title for a movie.
But haven't they run out of book titles and even short story titles?
Yeah, they have. But if they're going to make one up, make it cool.
Spy Me at Noon. There's a story behind that. I'll tell you that later.
I mean, James Bond is too. Just calling a movie James Bond is in this era, especially with the franchise, it's lame.
Yeah, it shouldn't be following trends. It should set them, really. It really should.
Or continue on with 50-year-old plus traditions.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. Sorry, Rob.
No, that was what I was saying. There doesn't seem a lot of appreciation for tradition.
I was just going to say, yeah, it seems like Hollywood, that's what they want to do, is go against tradition. And the one way of doing that is killing the old and beginning something new. And that's where a lot of the whole Logan and John Rambo's and these kind of movies seem to come into play, where it's like we're giving the old guys one last hoorah, and then we're going to bring in something new. Now, that didn't necessarily work with Rambo, but it seems to be the case with like Logan and a few other things that we've had happen here. And Rocky kind of with Creed in a way. You know, it's just kind of this ongoing trend to like get rid of the old and bring in the new. Now, we're not as lucky in some cases like with Creed and Cobra Kai, where they have reestablished these franchises in a good way. Most of the time we get the crap garbage like they've tried with Terminator how many times now and a few other franchises, where it just generally ends up falling flat on its face when they try to do something of that sort.
Yeah, I mean, look, Rocky was Rocky from the first movie, you know, and Logan, I thought Logan was cool for what it was, you know, because everyone, in a way, it was a play, could have called it, it was Wolverine and then the Wolverine, and then calling it Logan, I thought was really cool. It worked for that. But James Bond is the most, just calling a movie Bond or James Bond is so bland and generic, because, you know, if any of the trailers, it's always, you know, Daniel Craig
Picard.
is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 in. You got to have that like preamble, because that's what makes the Bond franchise.
I totally agree
cool.
with you guys, and I'm not even that big of a fan. I'm just seeing this from the outside in and seeing the trends. And somebody else had brought it up in the chat, and I had thought about it before. I'm like, what if they did that, though, since they've had... Because wouldn't this be Daniel Craig playing Bond for the fourth time? Isn't that like basically the record then?
The fifth time.
The fifth time would be the record? Okay.
Roger Moore.
No.
But he's played him for a period of time that's longer from the time he started.
That's what I was kind of trying to get to, is like, okay, so this guy's had this now, and if they wanted to like totally reboot and retwist this franchise after this last one, is which they keep talking like, this is it, this is the last one with Craig, and then we're going to try something different. I mean, could you see them doing that?
What we're seeing here, that they could now be continuing the 007 series with 007 Lashana Lynch.
That's what I'm getting at, is like they're going to continue on here on out and do the Creed thing or the whatever, but not do it well, unfortunately, in this case, because to me it sounds like they're screwing the pooch. Yeah. I mean, it has nothing to do with the race of the character. It has nothing to do with the sex of the character. It's they've tried this in the news. They've tried it with Idris Elba, and the backlash has been there. It's obvious that the traditional character here should not be fucked with for any reason whatsoever. And this goes to show that Hollywood always learns the wrong damn lessons when it comes to things like Wonder Woman and everything else. Instead of learning that Wonder Woman was already a strong, established female character that's been around for 70 some years, they just learned that, oh, we got to make everything a female superhero now. You know, it's like, no, you didn't take the right lesson from that. You took the wrong lesson. And the same thing with why James Bond is so beloved and endured for so much time, is because it's, from what I can gather from you guys and from what I've seen on screen from my own personal, observation, is he's never really changed. The character always stays the same. And that's why I've always said that Superman the movie is the blueprint on how to update a character. You don't mess with the main character. The main character stays the same. The world changes around them, and you adapt that character to that world. And that's what Superman the movie did. Superman doesn't change. Superman's the exact same Superman we've had since the 1940s.
Well, here's my thing. My whole thing is that if you have, I'm always about character and story. It's always, for me, I call it the Burnett axiom. Never put your universe before your characters and your story, because your universe grows out of character and story. And now, because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, everybody wants to have these universes of characters. I mean, if Daniel Craig's going to retire, you reboot James Bond with another actor. Whether it's Game of Thrones as Richard Madden or whatever, who's in. If you haven't seen the 6-episode Bodyguard on Netflix, the BBC series Bodyguard, that Richard Madden plays an agent in, I could see him being Bond. I'm like, I read somewhere that Barbara Broccoli liked Richard Madden as Bond. I'm like, he was on screen. He played Elton John's manager recently in Rocket Man. I think they're going to have to reboot. James Bond is still making a lot of money. We looked at Skyfall was over $1 billion. Spectre made over 800 million. And depending on what Bond 25 is going to do, they're not going to suddenly reconceptualize the James Bond character, because the James Bond character has been making tons of money. And at the end of the day, money talks. And it's interesting. Yeah. So I think they're going to reboot the Bond franchise again with another man playing James Bond.
That would be the smart move. And I'm not saying it just because I want to sound sexist or racist or anything like that. But again, like I reiterated, the scene with Lois and Superman when they're out at her apartment when they first meet is a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
That's Lois, one of the great scenes in not just any superhero movie, but just a great scene in any movie. Yeah,
because she throws every darn thing she can at him, like she's the audience. Going, oh, you're gonna make a Superman movie now. Okay. And you're going to have him fight for truth, justice, in the American way. Well, then he's going to be fighting every elected official in America. Right. And, she makes that joke. And the same thing with, the whole what color underwear am I wearing? Making it a bit more, the feminist movement has happened since Superman has been introduced. And, the world has changed since Superman has been introduced. But he just stands there and tells her, no, I'm going to be exactly who I am, because this is who I am, despite all these changes. And she's just like, huh, okay. And we're the audience. We just go along with it because they did that for us. And you could have a scene like that in any Bond movie where a woman could come up to him and say, well, don't you think you're just nothing but a sexist, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, yeah, but I get the job done. And that's really all that matters, is in the end, that's why he gets called on. And I get that with it. Even though I've never seen these movies, he's not the guy that you always want to call first. He's the guy who cleans up the mess. He's the guy who you have to call to do the job that nobody else wants to do, that nobody wants to talk about. He's a spy. He's an undercover agent. He's out there. He's an assassin. I mean, I get all this stuff from Rob all the time. You know, it's obvious that this is who this person is. And the moment you start picking away at things and start changing who it is, then it's no longer that character anymore. You might as well call it something else.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I was about to say the quintessential James Bond moments are like in The Spy Who Loved Me, when he is in the cabin with the gorgeous Russian girl, and he gets to the in the beginning, he gets a ticker tape on his watch, 007, please report in. I mean, those are kind of the typical James Bond moments. It shows you what this guy's life is like. You know, and to come in and say, well, yeah, we need to change this. I mean, it's a mistake. I really do think it is a mistake. I mean, you really are tampering with something that should not be messed with.
I just will say, I think that, they are tampering with it, but I think it's just going to be a temporary thing, because the pendulum swings, and now the pendulum is at one extreme, and everything in the entertainment industry is changing because of it. But that pendulum can swing the other way. And when it does, it might swing hard and it might swing fast. And then I think many things, especially things like James Bond, might be reset to where they once were. But for right now, though, we're dealing with a pretty changed James Bond, as we've covered already.
You know what? Well, you know another problem. I'm sorry. I was about to say, one of the problems I'm also seeing is that there's a lot of fans who cannot separate the character from the actor. And that's understandable, because you have one guy playing, let's just say Patrick Stewart. He plays Jean-Luc Picard for a long time. You can't see anybody playing that role. But we've had 7 people play James Bond.
Right.
So to recast this role is not a big stretch for a lot of people. So I was sorry. Before I so really cut you off, Rob, go right ahead.
I mean, the funny thing about to me, the idea of look, James Bond is a guy whose job it is to kill people, and his job is to stop people that want to kill lots of other people. For instance, Carl Stromberg in Spy Who Loved Me and Hugo Drax both tried to exterminate the human race. Like everybody. In the case of Moonraker, he dropped nerve gas into the atmosphere that was going to kill millions of people until Bond shot it out of the sky. You know, and it's as he piloted a space shuttle with Dr. Goodhead. You know, it's this idea that you want James Bond to be this all-encompassing, nice person that has these, I don't know. I mean, the reason James Bond has the appetites that he has is because he's always one step away from himself being killed. And the man is a sensualist. He literally devours life, whether it's food, fashion, information, languages, and especially women. He devours these things and lives life to the full, because at any minute it can be taken away from him. And that's why he does what he does. And I think, you know, that's part of that character. And I don't want him changed. I don't want James Bond stopping and think, you know what? You know what? This is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Maybe, Tallulah, stop it. Maybe I'm not going to sleep with her tonight. No, I don't want him to think like that, because tomorrow he might be dead. And that's why he knows what he knows, and he is how he is. It's because life can end for him at any moment, and he lives life to the full. And what's really interesting is the way our culture is going. It's almost as if, you know, we're trying to eliminate the sensual pleasures of life. And it's very strange.
Rob's right. The next title is going to be Bond No Means No, or whatever. You know, it's getting that point. I don't understand. You know,
yeah, that was a joke on the critic. I don't know if you remember the critic. Dr. No Means No.
I just don't get. I don't get it. I don't. I really don't. I don't get this latest trend to up and change and uproot and totally flip flop and make everything unrecognizable from what it really was before.
Well, Yeah, I was about to ask Rob. Are you a fan of Archer? Actually,
I've only watched a little bit of it. I don't know. I mean, I understand what it's trying to do. So yes,
all right.
I would say yes. I just haven't watched a lot of it.
Well, you said actually, he devours life because it could end at any moment. There's a frequent reference to that on Archer. He often says, "You know how many times I should have been killed by now?" And which is why he has sort of what the appetites he does. Obviously it's accentuated. It's turned up to 11. He goes into the expensive hotels and orders everything on the room service menu with no second thought as to what it's going to cost anybody. But again, that's the character I want in my spy.
Right.
Yeah, someone who lives unremorseful. Like, yeah, I know what I'm doing is bad, but if I don't do it, who will?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
exactly.
The way our culture seems to be heading, no one's going to touch anybody. No one's going to have. I mean, there is first and foremost. Remember, James Bond is fun. James Bond movies are fun to watch. They're fun to watch because he does things that we don't do. And if you're going to eliminate that from his character, why do I want to watch a James Bond movie? Half the reason, I mean, it's like, who's he gonna, what woman is he gonna come across now? I mean, that's part of the character, and it's part of the franchise. It's why people have watched Bond movies for over 50 years. And look, we've seen. I love the scene in like we talked about before, Goldfinger, when he's trying to sleep with Pussy Galore, and they have that they flip each other. They're in the barn, and they're flipping each other in the barn. They're having this playful sort of foreplayish or foreplayish scene. The idea that Bond is trying to seduce another 007, that's a great idea for a scene. I love this idea. I think it's great. And because I don't think Bond should be seducing or able, if there's a 007, that 007 has to be equal in every way, shape, and form. I would not want that character compromised, no matter who is playing her, or if it in fact is true, which I probably think it is. I want that 007 to be kick-ass, and I don't want that 007 to compromise what I know to be 007s. As a matter of fact, I hope she has a voracious sexual appetite the same way that Bond does, because she also is in the same position as him. She should drink up life. She should be a hard drinking, hard partying, smart as hell, kick-ass, effective assassin that is as good as Bond is, if not better. That's what I want from that new character. And if they do that, that character could be kick-ass, and I would love to see that. Make it cool.
Yeah,
that's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah. And I hope if they introduce a new 007 and it's her, I hope the first thing we see, and if she doesn't die in the pre-title sequence, I hope we see her in bed with somebody. I hope she's an unrepentant drinker. Maybe she smokes cigarettes. She drives fast cars. She's not going to be exactly like Bond, but do it in a way what's the female equivalent of James Bond?
That I wouldn't have an issue with. Yeah,
you don't want her doing just what a male Bond would do, but what is the female equivalent of Bond? What would a female do who's got the pressure that her life might end at any day? I don't think that character is going to go buy shoes or go shopping. If she's a 00, she's going to lead a life that she's probably going to be more like Jessica Jones is. And Jessica Jones, man, she sees Mike Coulter, she sees my Iron Man, Mike Coulter, Iron Man, Power Man. Mike Coulter's a beautiful man, and Jessica Jones unrepentantly slept with him, and she's a hard drinker, and she's a partier because she knows she's already been violated. She leads that life, and she doesn't make apologies as to who she is or why she does what she does. I want to see a character like that, the female equivalent of James Bond. Don't turn her into some, well, let's talk about our feelings. No, she's a killer. She's an assassin. She lives life on the edge where she's got to be all the time. What's the female equivalent of that? Show me that and make her kick ass.
Have you seen Red Sparrow? Because I was thinking, yeah, that would be a workable female alternative.
Exactly like Red Sparrow. Yes, exactly like that. Or Atomic Blonde.
I like that movie, by the way. I know not many people do, but I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a dark. Yes, but that's what a double O is.
Yeah.
Male or female, whatever color, whatever creed, whatever race, whatever your sexuality, whatever. I mean, hell, they could make her gay, and if there's a gay 007, fine with me, as long as like have her, multiple partners, and she's unrepentant about her sexuality, because why? She could die tomorrow. She doesn't have time to worry about your feelings. She's only interested in hers. Fuck yeah.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, that's the attitude I get from the fans, is like, why would you do? And then you're just going to do what we've seen happen a million times over if you do change that. And that is, you're going to alienate your core fan base. And in this world where, our attentions are so spread over so many things and short, you're not going to gain any ground with that. What are you going to gain? What are you going to gain? We've seen this happen and play out in so many different. The biggest franchise of all time is basically on a ledge right now because they've tried this with it. I mean, to the point where you've alienated so many main fans of Star Wars and Star Trek and all these big franchises. You do it to Bond. I mean, that's going to be like one of the last, Hollywood establishments that's just going to crumble.
Well, it depends on the execution, though.
Right,
I think that James
if
Bond
you do it like they
25
were just saying, it'd be okay.
Yeah, exactly. To do it Red Sparrow, but again, they're giving this a Me Too makeover. It's not going to get the Red Sparrow treatment. That's what it should be getting, but it's not going to get that. However, I still think that James Bond 25 is going to do huge numbers, if nothing else, for the curiosity factor. Now, if James Bond 26 does similar numbers, that's, of course, an entirely different matter.
Yeah. I just hope that I have not liked the last two Bond films, and I loved True Detective Season 1. And the fact that we have the director from True Detective Season 1 directing this film, despite all of its problems, I have huge hopes. I have very high hopes for this movie. And I hope it's great. And I desperately want it to be great. I'm flying to England. I'm going to see Bond 25 at the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square. And I want it to kick ass.
Yeah, I want it to be good too. So let's just hope for the best here. That's all I have to say on the matter. I just hope that they know what they're doing, which I know may be hoping for much, but I hope for the best for this.
Well, look, Cary Fukunaga True Detective Season 1 is pretty close to a masterpiece in my opinion, and he directed that whole series. And if he can bring, not that I want Bond to be like True Detective, but the intelligence and the storytelling that went on in True Detective, if we can get that in a Bond movie. So I think the real problem that a lot of these franchises have is they're very reliant on actors. And the actors ultimately end up getting into a position where they drive the franchise, because you need Daniel Craig to come back. Daniel Craig has become the biggest box office grossing Bond. So you don't want to alienate him. So what you do is you allow actors to have more creative control. But the problem with that is that actors by same thing with Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart is adopting and fostering dogs. So now, of course, hey, what if Picard had a dog? Oh, okay, we'll put a dog in there, whether that makes any sense or not. And I don't think that actors necessarily, by definition, they're thinking about their character. What do they want to play and what do they want to do? But that doesn't take into account the rest of the movie. And it always worries me when actors are given too much oversight on film projects, because they can't help but be thinking about themselves and their characters rather than the film as a whole. And I know that Daniel Craig has a lot of creative control that he's exerted over this film that he had put into his contracts. The same way I am sure that not only is Patrick Stewart getting paid a buttload of money, but he has a lot of creative control over Star Trek. And one of the things that I've learned over the years in my dealings with actors in Star Trek is I don't necessarily think the actors who are in these shows really understand why they appeal to audiences. They think they do, but they don't really.
Well, and that goes with also the writers and people that get involved in productions anymore, showrunners and producers, they're not even really fans, and they even admit it. They blatantly admit that they're not fans of this stuff, and that's not always necessarily a bad thing. But for every Nicholas Myers, there's going to be 100 other people who are just going to fall flat on their face because you put the wrong person in charge.
Well, yeah, what you need is somebody who's smart, and somebody who's very smart, like Nick Meyer, understands. Okay, Gene Roddenberry says, go look at the Horatio Hornblower novels, and everything you need to know about Star Trek is in those books. He reads as a smart, intelligent, learned, very well-educated individual and a writer himself. Nicholas Meyer goes, oh, okay, I get it. Then he goes and watches 10 episodes of the original series or whatever, and he gets Star Trek. He totally understands it. And he was there to, of course, reinvent Star Trek at a lower budget level. But what did he do? Anybody who's literary, anybody who has an understanding of storytelling that's literate, is a writer themselves, can look at the franchise and go, I get what makes this work. I understand who these characters are and how they work. Great writers understand that because they're usually highly educated people. And Nicholas Meyer is a very highly educated individual. The problem is so many writers now, especially that are working in TV, a lot of them are very well educated, but some of them have only known television. You know, Michelle Valentine, what the hell did she know about science fiction? And she comes over onto Discovery, and we get the most rudimentary bargain basement, stupid AI storyline you could possibly come up with that was stolen from a David Mack novel that was infinitely better than what we had televised. I mean, it's unbelievable. But once you get a job, you want to hold on to it and get paid. But I think Daniel Craig wanting to bring in Phoebe Waller-Bridge was actually a good thing. That was a smart choice that he did. He didn't say, I want to do it. He brought her in to do it because she's proven her chops on TV as a writer and a performer. But as a writer, her Killing Eve, man, that shit's that was some great stuff. And if you bring a little bit of that in with some True Detective into the Bond franchise, I think we're in for something special. At least that's what I'd like to believe.
Well, I hope that for the best for you guys in that case. I like the problem with Phoebe Waller I have is Solo, I can't. That movie's unwatchable to me. Like, I get to that point with Lando and her, and I can't get past it. There's just so many moments in that movie that I just can't. I can't stomach it anymore. I bought it so I could try and watch it again, and I just can't do it. The droid lives matter thing and everything beyond that. Just droids have been treated like crap in Star Wars constantly.
They're tools. Yeah, really. If you think about it, they're treated no differently than a screwdriver. If you think about it, yeah. I mean, there's really not a lot of attachment to it. Luke only really shows some attachment to R2,
and that's way after like he saved his life. How many times? Like otherwise, he treats 3PO like dirt. Like everybody treats they shut him off. I just had an issue with that movie, but I hope she's doing the right thing here. I hope she brings something to the table that's not only unique and different, but plays well in the same sandbox. That's the problem. You bring in too many people that don't play well in the sandbox, and the toys get ruined. That's my kind of saying on that.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping. There's one thing that you still have some people, the stewardship of Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, they do play it safe. You know, they do play it safe. And I think they're going to try. I don't know. I'd like to believe hope springs eternal. until I see it, I hope it's good.
And that's one thing that we love about you is you're an eternal optimist when it comes to these things. Unfortunately, we have, as members of Midnight's Edge, a bit of a reputation for not having such a positive outlook. So I'm sure Rob, on the other hand, has a much more gloomier outlook on the situation. But I don't know if he wants to add to it at all.
Well, as Gary from Nerdrotic says, hope is not a strategy. that's really, I mean, yeah. So that's all I got to add to that.
Right now, though, hope is all we got. But again, I have to say, since we tend to cover rights issues and stuff like that rarely is very positive from the fan point of view. For some positivity, absolutely go check out the Burnett work. Because that's an amazing YouTube channel, and everyone that's watching Midnight's Edge and feel a little bit down after watching our videos, go to the network and you'll be cheered right up again.
Well, thank you for that. But I watch all your videos too, especially the Star Trek related videos, because I first of all, I like all the production of your videos. I think you guys, it's funny to me, when I started working in the YouTube space, I wasn't necessarily aware of this is how naive I was. I wasn't aware of controversy. Like I watch various YouTube channels. I watch all kinds of people on YouTube from all different sides of the aisle, of all different belief systems. And because I'm curious, I'm just curious in what people have to say and what people are thinking about. And I like watching. I started watching the intellectual dark web a couple of years ago. People like, I watched a lot of Jordan Peterson, and because he suddenly became this cultural figure, and I didn't know much about him. So I'm like, Jordan Peterson, that's interesting. And I was listening to him, and I like what he had to say. He seemed pretty bang on. And then I started looking into him, and then he became huge. He sort of crested this wave, as many people do. And I started watching a lot of like Dave Rubin's interviews. And then I've always liked Joe Rogan and all these people, anybody that will be on and talk for a while, like do long form interview stuff. Well, I didn't realize how many people, and I do that with genre people as well. Like Gary Beekler from Nerdrotic, I just like listening to his videos, and I agree with him on a lot of things. And clearly, the one thing that Gary has that I love the most is his passion for this material. Now, I might disagree with him, but he is clearly a passionate fan who's out there sharing himself and his views with people. Now, is he going to cause any damage to my life if he says something that I don't agree with? No. And I can watch his videos and enjoy them. I watch your videos and your Star Trek videos and the ones you do research and you speculate, and I'm like, I know that there's some truth to some of the things that you guys have reported on simply through my own experience. And so I enjoy watching these videos, and I just don't understand why. To me, you have to have a well-rounded look at everybody on the web. And if you only are watching or listening to things that you totally agree with, where's the fun in that? I don't need to be told somebody that agrees with me 100% of the time. How do I learn? I think you should always be watching things or listening to people talk that you might fundamentally disagree with, because that allows you to delve into your own beliefs by listening to somebody you might not agree with. And that is valuable. And I don't think there's anybody that I agree with 100% of the time. I watch all kinds of different channels, but I didn't realize that there is a lot of controversy. I mean, somebody described it to me as we're all part of the intellectual dork web, which I really liked. I mean, and they were including me in there. They were saying that I'm part of the same intellectual dork web that you guys and Gary and Doomcock. I love Doomcock. He's hilarious. I mean, he's playing a character. The Doomcock character is a character. And if a lot of what Doomcock is saying entertains me, I'm very entertained by the Doomcock character. A lot of what Doomcock says is true.
Can I share with our viewers the first thing you ever told me or asked me the first time we spoke?
Sure.
The first time I spoke with Robert Meyer Burnett, this was hilarious. Yeah, you can say the question. What did you ask me the first time?
I think I asked you if you were Doomcock.
Yes. I thought that was hilarious. There's so many people that think that somehow I'm Doomcock, or there's fewer people thinking that now after we would have been in several podcasts together.
Well,
but
it's funny when you
that
guys
was the first thing you got. That was so hilarious.
Yeah, when he's on, not as Doomcock, I mean as himself. It's not like he goes everywhere with the Doomcock persona. He comes on podcasts and talks. And I just, first of all, I love the videos he has with his avian sidekick that's in the cage. I mean, there's production value in that. It's a fun character. I mean, it's like, come on. It's not like he's getting online like Ben Shapiro, even though I've watched Ben Shapiro and there's some things that Ben Shapiro has said that I've actually agreed with. not usually, but I still watch Ben Shapiro. A lot of people are like, for shame.
Well, that's the biggest problem, I think, just to interrupt real quick, is everybody out there seems like, well, you have to pick one side or the other. And whether it's political, whether it's a franchise, whether it's your personal choice of a brand, it's like, whatever happened to individuality anymore? You know, and then the same thing goes with all this, you know, amped up PC culture that we're in now, that I don't want to use all the same, you know, words that everybody throws out there for, but it's out there. It's like, you know, these people for years were arguing that, well, we don't want to be labeled. We don't want to be, you know, put in these categories by these labels. And now it's like, you better pay attention to my label or I'm going to freak out. You know, it's like, well, make up your mind what you want, because not everybody is going to follow along. Everybody has different tastes. Everybody has different backgrounds. And even somebody who may have that same label as you is not going to enjoy everything that you enjoy. You know, to me, it's like everybody, for the most part, loves pizza. Not everybody, but just about everybody loves pizza. But at the same time, everybody loves a different kind of pizza. So we have to remember that it's all a very individuality in everything that goes out there. And I think that goes really into what you were saying, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah, well,
You
think
know,
about how many, think about how many different ways there are to make pizza. I mean, geez, you know, even that. Sausage, onions, mushrooms, olives, I mean, pepper. I mean,
Besides just brands. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to say, though, a lot of people actually thought I was Doomcock. I'm like, no, I'm not that clever. Please.
Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, Doomcock he's really smart. You know, it's just,
he's overlooking it the whole time. I'm Doomcock. No,
I mean, he's very smart, and he's a fun person to listen to. I mean, look, I like all different kinds of people on the internet, and it's I think what's interesting to me is I try and bring a positivity, because I try and look at all sides of a story. You know, there's always three sides of the story. There's your side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth, you know, somewhere in the middle. And I think that we have forgotten how to be able to listen to one another, because at the end of the day, all of us, whatever website you're listening to, or whatever people you like to watch on the internet, whether you're a member of the Fandom Menace or not, we're all fans. And at the end of the day, we're arguing about movies and television and comic books and video games. All of those things are supposed to be fun, you know? So even though we're on opposite sides of the aisle, or we can bitch and moan at one another, we're still talking about things that are inherently fun. And that it should remain fun. Yeah. And when it stops being fun, that's when we're doing something wrong. When we're making it all not fun. And that's where I'm like, God, that's why I love hanging out with you guys, because we all are passionate about what we love, and it's fun.
Well, and we get a lot of, you know, I mean, like guys like Gary at Nerdrotic and Doomcock and Mecha Random and us and Geeks and Gamers and all the other Fandom Menace people that get under this little umbrella. We're called toxic all the time. But you know what? Just in the last month, I think we've all done several different things to raise money for like charities and all kinds of other things. And it's like, God, we're such a toxic community, but we do all this stuff. You know, it just doesn't add up. And it really just goes to show, just like the whole thing that's going on with Mecha right now with the whole, you know, Captain Marvel fans and stuff. It's like, you know, these people come out of the woodwork to attack us personally, but they never stop and think for one moment that we're just talking about the things that we love and we like, and even things we dislike about the things that we love and like. And you can do that.
Well, some of the things that she's been enduring, I mean, she's posted, I've read some of the things people have sent her. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah, and she's trying to take it as best she can in stride. She's trying to let it as much, and it bothers her. Of course it does. But, you know, you got to let as much as it if you can roll off your back, because it's just internet noise. And she understands that part of it. I mean, she's truly not that worried about a Russian tank coming rolling down her road. But that's still not something you message to somebody, and it's ridiculous that Twitter's letting it go on.
Yeah, no, I mean the stuff that well, first of all, I want to know what kind of people grew up in a world where they think that they can say something like that to another person. Like, you know, I would have had my mouth washed out with soap when I was a kid, literally, if I talked the way some people are talking to each other on the internet.
Right. It is. It's like ridiculous. It's like, well, you like the color red? Well, I hate you because my favorite color is blue. And that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you say that to a woman, it's like, come on, dude. I mean, one thing also, I'm old school. I believe in holding a door open for a woman still, and even though I've recently been yelled at for doing that.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, yo, okay. All righty then.
You know what? I actually had like a similar experience when I was in the States, because again, I'm from Europe, where we have this chivalry. We still have that alive and well. So I always hold the doors open for men and women.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, but in the States, I got like, I can do that myself. It's like
Yeah,
pretty funny.
You know, and it's funny. It's like, okay, the thing is, the real thing is, the sad part about it is, I think people really want that world to exist where chivalry will constantly exist. I don't want to live in a world where I don't hold doors open for people. I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in a world where there's civility, where people always think when they leave their house what's best for the body politic, not necessarily what's best for themselves. I mean, I grew up in that world. I had those ideals instilled in me by my parents. You know, and like when people are talking about they want James Bond to be a more equal opportunity or a more woke version of the character, I'm like, the guy is saving the world from megalomaniacs that kill people. I mean, I don't want him to stop and think, is this politically correct enough, or I'm going to get pilloried on Twitter if I do this? I don't want that. I want him to be able to rock and roll at a moment's notice. You know, and if that means he has to seduce the wife of a douchebag that has information he needs to stop a terrorist bombing, then by God, James Bond should do it.
Seduce away.
Seduce away.
The world needs a James Bond, the proper old school James Bond.
Yeah. And that's so we have the luxury of being woke. James
That's
Bond
a good point.
James Bond is, remember, all of this is luxury items. All of inclusion and representation, all of that's luxury, because we're talking about, we're not on the African veldt running away from predators that want to eat us. We're not looking for the next cave we're supposed to sleep in. We have a beautiful civilization that somehow has managed to evolve despite humanity, because we're not nice people. At least that's what history shows us to be. And the fact that we're able to argue about all this stuff over the most technologically advanced communication system that's ever existed in history, and we've just turned it into a way to bitch and moan at one another, says a lot about us. Maybe we do need a virulent pandemic that a spy doesn't stop, and it does wipe out 99% of the population of the planet. Because then everybody would shut the fuck up and realize, we used to have it pretty good. But we didn't realize
how Ozymandias.
Yeah, I'm all about that. I'm all about it. I mean, Sam Jackson's character in Kingsman, I'm like, I'm on your side.
I always maintained Thanos did nothing wrong.
Thanos did nothing wrong.
Well, I think the only thing that Thanos did wrong was he didn't individually pick people himself. It was a random thing.
A little bit too fair.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? And only imagine, I mean, people would be, at least we just don't, we forget as we bitch and moan and scream and yell at each other how lucky we are to live in a society that has built platforms where, free of charge, we can talk to each other even right now. I mean, we might have to pay for internet access, but we're using platforms, multidisciplinary platforms that have global reach. It's a pretty amazing world we live in, and we tend to forget that. We'd rather yell and scream at each other, or deny vaccination works, or pretend the earth is flat, or whatever else. But please, I mean, it's.
Can't we just bitch about Superman, please? Just
yeah.
I'm sick of the other stuff.
I mean, if we want to talk about James Bond, Superman, Star Trek, or Star Wars, that is the peak of luxury civilization. We have definitely reached a point in our society where we're doing pretty good if we're yelling and screaming at each other about Star Wars and Star Trek, and some idiot is sending mecha random, harsh, horrible shit that she doesn't deserve.
That's the line.
That same guy would be desperate to buy her a drink in a bar and take her home.
Yeah.
But no, he's sitting there bitching and moaning and saying hateful shit in his little incel basement. And it's like, come on, dude. Do better. Do better.
I agree. Those are words to live by. Do better.
And that's why I love you, Robert Meyer Burnett, as a man, as a human being, as a pundit, as a reporter, as everything you are, a writer, director. I aspire to be more like you every day. I try.
Well, I wish you more success than me.
And I'm not even the least bit sarcastic. I'm sincerely honest about that. I've tried so much harder every day to be a little bit more like Robert Meyer Burnett. To remember that there's always a little bit of a golden horizon out there somewhere. Even I just got to find it. You know,
that is my guiding philosophy of life. I end all of my live streams by saying, "Have a better day."
That's good.
Have a better day, because everything can be better. You know, it's going to get better. It's always going to be better. And, you know, I used to say that to people in my more glib days. I would say, you know, if climate change is real, or if the world is going to come to an end, or we're all going to die in nuclear fire or by some raging pandemic like in The Stand, I at least want to be around to see that happen. Because wouldn't that be interesting?
I want to be around to see the shit hit the fan. I get you. I totally do. Yeah, I'm like gosh, George Carlin.
And it might put you into a position where you might be put in a position as the world is coming to an end where you could be a hero.
Yeah,
at least for just one day.
That's one thing I do feel bad is George Carlin didn't get to see the world end and go, "I was right, you fuckers!" just before he burned. Because I do. I'm kind of the same way. I don't want to be a part of it, but I just want to watch the happenings sometimes, you know.
Or at the very least, like a Kang at the end of, what was his name? Kang at the end of Star Trek 3, The Search of Spock. The planet is tearing itself apart. Yes, exhilarating, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. Krug. Yeah, I mean, it's like, or you go back to Core and Errand of Mercy when they're talking about the war and they're resigning themselves that the Organians have stopped the conflict between the Klingons and the Federation. Core says at the end, "Yeah, you know what? But it would have been glorious." and no, but my whole brand is I think the world, all things being equal, I think the world is a pretty amazing place. I think there's more representation, there's more equality, there's more opportunity than there's ever been before. We have amazing technology. We have the amazing ability to communicate with people all over the world. Andre is here from another country in real time for free, when 10 years ago you couldn't make phone calls like this. And we live in amazing times. And we have been afforded the luxury of living in a world of plenty, at least we here in the States. And the real question is, because we have all of that, what are we going to do with it? What do we want? You know, Yuval Harari wrote a book. He's an Israeli historian and writer. He wrote a book called Sapiens. He also wrote another book called Homo Deus. But in Sapiens, which is basically a history of 100,000 years of humanity, he asks the question at the end of the book, what do we want? What does the human species as a whole, what do we want? I don't think we know the answer. Now, we're basically chasing our own tails, like Ouroboros. We're eating our own tails. It's a circular. We've got all this great stuff, but we're bitching and moaning and complaining. What do we want as a species? I want for us to go out amongst the stars. I want us to live forever. We can download our consciousness into AI mainframes and live in virtual worlds forever. I don't want to die, but I would like
a true futurist.
Yeah, man, put me on a generational spaceship. Put my consciousness in a generational spaceship.
Head in a jar.
Live in a virtual reality, and I'm on a 1,000-year voyage to the nearest star system. Man, sign me up. I mean, we live in great times. It's only going to get better. We are going to solve our problems.
I hope so. I do, and that's why I look up to you, man. We got a couple super chats real quick. Let's break through them here. Flaming TP, $3.50, because we got to keep the lights on here. So thank you so much, guys. Let's congratulate Dennis Rodman on his new role in 007. Well, we take that as well. Capester, $1.99 super chat. The Spy in the Golden Sunset. I think that was his option for a new title. And then we had one from Gabriel Queriago. Sorry if I'm ruining your name, Gabriel. I'm sorry. Bond, $10 from Gabriel. Bond was a cultural icon and escapist fantasy for men to be that debonair spy that flew to exotic locations and saved the world while meeting beautiful women. It's sad to see that be taken away. And then that kind of brings us back around to the whole conversation to begin with, I think, right there nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we come full circle. And with that, I want to thank, first of all, the panel, especially you, Robert Meyer Burnett, for joining us. You're always welcome. And
Huge
we're
treat
always
when you
glad
get to
have
join
you.
us. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. Look, I have fun doing these. It's great. It's a pleasure for me. I appreciate being invited.
And with that, I'd also like to say thank you to everyone listening. Thanks for taking time out of your Sunday to come listening to us. We really appreciate that. And thanks for all the super chats and your continued support. Remember to subscribe to both the Burnett Work. Sorry, getting late here, and to us. And when you see a video from us that you like, then feel free to share it, because YouTube certainly doesn't. So yeah.
And I shared the link to the Burnett Work once again in the chat for anybody who wants to make sure that they subscribe to Rob's channel.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I've had an adjacent website too, the burnettwork.net, where I'm publishing letters that people are writing me. And one of the things I really like about the community that we're building on my channel is how diverse it is, and how many people of all different ilks and walks of life and all different fan dispositions have been writing me. And I try and keep up an air of civility, and it seems to be working. And as evidenced by the letters I get from people, so I'm quite proud of that.
You've made some individuals like internet celebrities in their own right, like Willow Yang and
Willow Yang. By the way, she wrote me a great. Willow Yang writes these incredible. I didn't know who Willow Yang was. She watches the John Campea show, and she just started sending me these letters. She's a PhD student. She's studying molecular biology, and she writes incredible articles, reviews of classic Star Trek episodes, which she had never seen before. And she's in her 20s, and I read her review today of The Trouble with Tribbles, and it was great. I mean, it's been such a treat meeting people from all over the world. I love it.
Indeed. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and have a great day.